resident. But we know a non-resident, someone who was not born in South Africa, might still be a resident for tax purposes. That is now if they pass the physical presence test. And that is why I told you that your client might give you a wrong answer. Then we also look for companies. Now we said the two main things for a company is that the first thing that we look at, and that's the first one, is always easy. Ordinary resident, that is easy to determine. It is the second part, the physical presence test, or non-resident, how to determine whether they are actually a resident for tax purposes. For companies, incorporated, established, or formed, now that is easy. We will check where did you register the company and all of that. So either that, or if we can't find that, then we need to look at place of effective management. And guys, place of effective management is a bit of a or there might be some difficulty to establish that. Here's a flow chart again: resident, natural person, ordinary resident, or physical presence test. Non-natural person, so companies, you look at where was it incorporated, established, or formed, or you look at place of effective management. Then we started with natural persons, and we spoke about ordinary residents for natural person. And we said ordinary resident, it's not defined in the Act. What did I tell you? If it's not defined, we have to look at court cases. We need to look at case law. And that is why I gave you those court cases that you need to study. Now, guys, there's a misconception of what you should do. I don't expect you to know that court case like a parrot. If I now say, what is established in the Cohen court case, I don't expect you to know that like a parrot. Please, you are not supposed to memorize those 26 pages. You need to read through the court case to get an understanding of what went on there, and you should be able to give me the principle. The principle is what? So basically give me a background, tell me, okay, they were busy determining ordinary resident, and then you need to tell me a bit of the facts and a little bit of what did the judge actually found. Was the person, were the person now a ordinary resident or not? So you need to be able to produce the principle. Okay, now we defined the ordinary resident. We said if you do something continuously or on a permanent basis, such as eat, sleep, and work, and the place where you work, then you can be referred to as an ordinary resident. Then I said there are two very important court cases for ordinary resident. Cohen versus Commissioner of Inland Revenue, that is what CIR stands for. And then we will look at CIR versus Kittel. Now, guys, it's very important. If I ask you a court case relating to ordinary resident, then you will not just write Cohen. I will mark you wrong. You need to tell me Cohen versus CIR. And it's very important that you get the order correct, because it was Mr. Cohen that actually challenged the Commissioner of Inland Revenue. Here, it was the Commissioner of Inland Revenue that challenged Mr. Kittel. So if you put Kittel here and CIR there, I'm also marking you wrong, because then it means you have the principles wrong. You don't know who it is that actually challenged the other one. So therefore, guys, if I ask for court cases, I repeat, relating to ordinary resident, you need to tell me Cohen versus CIR, CIR versus Kittel, and not just Cohen Kittel. That is not enough. Now, guys, let's look at these court cases for the first one. And these court cases relate to natural persons. Okay, so guys, I will always try to first give you the natural person aspect, and then we will look at the juristic person aspect. So the first court case, Cohen versus CIR. So here, guys, TP stand for taxpayer. So taxpayer, the taxpayer was one of the two directors of OK Bazaar in 1929. Now, guys, this is beyond your time, but there was also a OK Bazaar in Namibia back then. When I grew up, I also know of this place, but anyway, and it was a South African franchise. So one of the two directors in 1929, and OK Bazaar find it difficult to actually obtain the inventory, the stock, the merchandise from an overseas company and to bring it into the Republic. Remember, we said when we talk about the Republic, we are talking about South Africa. And then it was decided that Mr. Cohen, who is one of the directors, that he went to New York to act as a buyer on behalf of the company. Okay, so Cohen, and that was now in 1940, Cohen had to move to New York to act as a buyer for the company. But guys, I think you can already see that this was needed. This move was needed, but only for business purposes, isn't it? Because they actually found it difficult to actually secure the merchandise, the inventory, and that's why Cohen had to move to New York in 1940. And Mr. Cohen took his wife and 3 kids and even a nurse. He even took a nurse along that went along with him to New York. The plan was that he would only stay there for 9 months, so it was planned for a 9-month trip. Later on, it was extended to a year, and guys, he even lived beyond 1 year. He even lived in New York until 1942. You see, he moved there 1940, and he even stayed there until 1942. And even until 1942, his family had not returned to South Africa. Now, guys, the issue was with his Johannesburg residence, his house that he actually had in Johannesburg. And while he was in New York, he leased it to tenants and he earned money. Obviously, the tenants had to pay him rent. And the reason for this court case was that Mr. Cohen felt that the money that he received was basically should not be included in gross income because he's not a resident, and that's where this whole challenge came about between Cohen and the Commissioner of Inland Revenue. So he didn't want to pay tax since he thought he was not in South Africa since 1940. However, he received... Yes? Can you got someone talking? Did you speak to me? You can't see my slides?
I can see the slides.
Okay, no problem. I'll try to. Ooh, that's weird. Can you guys see it now?
Yes, sir. We are seeing your slides.
All right.
Yes,
tell
sir.
me, what was the slides gone all this time?
Maybe
No, sir.
On my
No, sir.
Okay.
Okay, seems like, but anyway, it's working now, so please mute your microphones. Let's continue. So yes, guys, the issue was the Johannesburg rental income for their house that they actually leased to tenants. Now, what was found in this court case, it was actually found that Mr. Cohen is a resident for tax purposes. Now, guys, remember, for tax purposes, we are not looking for whether you are ordinary resident or basically what we are looking for is whether you are resident. Remember, in the tax act, we are only talking about a resident. We don't establish between ordinary and non-resident, all of that. However, we saw how the principles will be applied. Okay. So we established in this court case is whether Cohen is a resident for tax purposes. And we know if you are a resident for tax purposes, that is when we will split it now, whether you are ordinary resident or a non-resident. Now, in this court case, it was found that Mr. Cohen is a resident, and what the judge basically said was merely being absent for a year does not preclude. Preclude just mean actually exempt you from being a South African resident. Okay, so Mr. Cohen was found to be a resident, and therefore he had to include that rental income in his gross income, and he had to pay tax on it. Okay, so it was also found in that court case, his country would be the country to which he would normally or naturally, and as a matter of course, return from his wanderings. As contrasted with other lands, it might be called his usual or principal residence, and it would be described more aptly than other countries as his real home. So guys, what they say is, even you, let's say you were a South African, and since we teach you international accounting standards, remember you can work in anywhere or any place in the world. You can work in Australia, Switzerland, anywhere. All right. Now let's say you go there, but guys, the question remains, where will you return from your wanderings? What do you consider to be your home? And we see how you guys sometimes move abroad, and then we see the soft life and all those things that you post now. But then there's always a place that you sometimes return to after 2 years or 1 year. Then you decide Europe is not for me anymore, it's cold. That might be you. And then you come back to Namibia or to South Africa. And if that is the case, then we will say, where are you returning to after your wanderings? Okay, now let's continue with this. So that is what was found in that one. Let's have a look at the Kittel court case. So yes, guys, in the Cohen court case, we realize Mr. Cohen was a resident for income tax purposes because he's real, because you can see, guys, he actually returned after 1942. Yes, he was there for like 2-3 years, but where will he return? Where will he return at the end of the day? So let's have a look at Kittel. Now here the Commissioner of Inland Revenue challenged Mr. Kittel, and they this, just to give you background, guys, where do I get this background? In these court cases. Let me show you. I need to show you this so that people don't think I'm sucking this out of my thumb, and you actually need to go through these court cases. Okay, so there's Cohen. Here are all the facts and even the issue and the judge's decision and even the principle. The principle that was established is, where will you return from your wanderings? Here is Kittel. There we have the facts, the issue, the judge's decision, and the principle again. So very important that you open these court cases while you study the theory. Okay, so here we had Mr. Kittel had an 85% shareholding in Atlantic Fishing Enterprises. So he had an 85% shareholding. Okay, and then he decided, or the tax, yes, Mr. Kittel, the taxpayer decided to open an office in New York from which he would manage his American business. Okay, so Mr. Kittel, we can see he actually now immigrates. So in 1983, he and his wife immigrated to the USA, and they say since he actually went to USA, that is where he found a place to stay. So it seems like he got a flat or a house. They don't give enough information whether he bought the house or whether he's just leasing. He established a home. He joined a church. Maybe he joined Stephen Fatigue. That's just a joke. Established an office. So he established, obviously, the office in New York. He registered with Social Security. Now, guys, Social Security is a big thing in the USA. It's not the same as here in Namibia. When we talk Social Security in Namibia, just know that you are not talking about the one in USA. In USA, it's a big deal. If you contribute to Social Security, then the government actually look after you. Here in Namibia, I think we wanted to use the same principle. I don't know if it's working. Anyway, he bought a car there in New York, and in the 2 years, While he was there, he returned to South Africa 9 times for business and private purposes. So basically just for business purposes and even private. Maybe he came for a holiday or whatever, but they say in 2 years he only came to South Africa for 9 times. Now let's look at what was found. So it was decided that the taxpayer was not normally a resident in the Republic. So here we see with Cohen, he was a resident. It was found for him to be a resident. For Kittel, it was found for him not to be a resident in the Republic. So Judge Goldstone made the statement that the person can have more than one place of residence. So you can live in more than one place. And he added that the Kittel case referred to ordinary resident. And what was found there is they said that the natural and ordinary meaning of ordinary resident was that a person must be habitually and normally resident here, apart from temporary or occasional absences of long or short duration. Now, guys, this word is so important, habitually, habit. Where do you sleep, eat, and rest your head at night? Where is your, what do you consider your habit to be? Your, basically where you actually sleep and do things on a continuous basis. Now, guys, unfortunately, with this court case, what they also found, indeed, yes, they found Mr. Kittel not to be a resident, but it was not enough. They needed to give more information with regard to that, and the more information that they gave us, or that's the commissioner had to look at, or SARS, was found in interpretation note 3. Now, very important, guys, court cases, that is case law, so it is binding. However, interpretation notes is not the law. So you need to establish between the two. Interpretation notes are not binding on a citizen. Why? Because it's not the law. It is just a guidance, some further things that you can look at. Now let's look at what is contained in interpretation note. The important principle is that it must be the person's intention to become an ordinary resident in South Africa. So guys, if you are from another country and you come and you immigrate to South Africa, then we will look at, is it your intention to become a South African resident? And what would we look at? We will look at those factors shortly. And guys, these are very subjective. These things are not objective. Intention. How will you measure for someone's intention? How will you be exactly? How would you be, 100% sure that it is someone's intention? However, there are certain things that we can look at, and then we will also look at, did he or she must have taken steps that indicate this intention. Now, guys, clearly from this definition or from these two steps, we can see that for instance, without looking at the slides, I would, for instance, look at, did you apply for permanent residency? Because that would give me an indication of your intention. Your intention. If you are now staying in South Africa for 3 years, but you keep on telling me, no, I don't want to apply for permanent residency because I'm going back to my country, I would probably then argue and say, oh, it seems like your intention is not to become an ordinary resident. However, I need to mention that alone, the fact that I just told you, just by looking at whether you've applied for permanent residence, that alone is not enough for me to say that you are or your intention is to become an ordinary resident or resident or not. That is not enough. Now let's look at some other factors. So we will look at the person's most fixed and settled place of residence. Now guys, where are you the most? Are you in New York most of the time, or are you in South Africa? Guys, very important. you cannot just look at one of these things. In fact, this list is not even complete. So you need to kind of build a strong case. Now, guys, I also need to just tell you that these court cases, Mr. Kittle's court case might indicate that he was not a resident. But these court cases can also be challenged. As a tax lawyer or as a tax expert, you can challenge these court cases. Why? Because these facts here is unique to Mr. Kittle, and that is why the judge made a decision. However, your client might not have all these factors, okay? And therefore, you can always challenge these court cases. What I'm trying to say is the court cases, yes, it is case law and it is binding, but there is no reason for you not to challenge these court cases, and you might even get a different outcome. You might even, or this one here for Cohen, especially with Cohen, it might be found with your client, yes, we will rely on this court case, but the principles at the end of the day, we might have a different conclusion where it can be concluded that your client is actually not a resident or something like that. So let's look at these factors. The person's most fixed and settled place of residence, his place of habitual abode. So basically your habit. What do you consider your habit? Your habit, you know, with animals, we use that habitat. Basically, that word comes from that. Basically your home. For an animal, normally we say that is their habitual or their habit, and that is where they live. And then his place of business and personal interest. So where are your transactions? What transactions are you actually entering into, and where is your personal interest? Where does it lie? Now, guys, you can see all these things are very subjective, because I might say one thing and my client might say another thing, okay? And then we will look at the individual status in the particular country. So basically what I told you earlier, did you apply for permanent residency or not? The location of your personal belongings, guys. Here we will look at, did you sell your house in South Africa? And did you buy a new house in New York? Did you buy a car there? Where are your personal belongings, or at least where are your important personal belongings? His nationality. So guys, we can also look at the nationality. Okay, are you South African? Are you American? However, once again, I just need to highlight, you cannot just look at the one is not enough. You need to continue, or you cannot just rely on one of these factors, okay? His family and social relations. In our test, we might tell you his family also moved, or we might tell you his son is still in South Africa while he is abroad, and things like that. And then you need to analyze. It seems like these people might then return to South Africa, but we will give you enough guidance in a test for you to make these decisions. Is political, cultural, and other activities. We will look at, maybe you got residency there now, and now you are also allowed to vote. And then we will look at, do you belong to a political party or a cultural party, and any other activities. Then your application for permanent residency actually goes along there with your status in that particular country. And then any period spent abroad. So how long have you been out of the country and so forth. And then the purpose and nature of the visits, if you now come to South Africa, and the frequency thereof. So even how frequently are you actually visiting South Africa? And guys, just to give you a little bit of background, I think 3 years ago, it can be more, we had those xenophobic attacks in South Africa, and I know of people that went to the airport, you know, from Namibia to South Africa, but because you guys know that a lot of the companies that trade in Namibia is actually South African companies, like Old Mutual, Sanlam, all those ones are actually South African companies. So the headquarters are normally in South Africa. So a lot of business people or a lot of people here in Namibia are always going to South Africa for work purposes and all of that. And with those xenophobic attacks, some of the people were actually attacked, maybe not physically, but at the airport, where people were saying that you guys are so frequently in South Africa, you are actually taking our jobs away and all of that. Obviously, that was a very, very bad time for South Africa and for the whole of Africa, because it was Africans killing Africans and so forth. But you understand, you also get an understanding of why these attacks actually happened and all of that. But basically, how those people decided that you are now a South African is because some people were frequent flyers. So you were flying to South Africa frequently, and they just decided then it means you are actually now a resident and you don't even pay your taxes and things like that. Obviously, it was not enough, or one of these factors are not enough for you to decide that someone is an ordinary resident. So guys, we need to look at the intention. We need to look at what steps have you taken that indicate this intention, and then we can even look at some other factors. Now guys, that was with regard to ordinary resident. However, we said if you are not ordinary resident, we will still check whether you are resident for tax purposes. So let's look at this flow chart. So for a natural person, we will look at, is the person ordinary resident in South Africa? If the answer is no, then we need to apply the physical presence test. Now guys, physical presence test, if you want the scope, remember I don't give scopes, but if you want the scope for test 1, the physical presence test will be there. It will always be there. We will test you on the physical presence test. Now guys, there are 3 requirements that must be satisfied. So all 3 of them have to be met. A person, a taxpayer, must meet all 3 of them in order for them to be considered resident and for them to actually now pay tax on that basis. So there are 3 requirements that need to be satisfied in terms of this test to be deemed a resident, even if you are not an ordinary resident. So the first requirement, the person must have spent or must have been physically present in South Africa for more than 91 days. Now guys, in a test, I just give you 91 days. 91 days is not more than 91 days. There's a difference. I'm trying to tell you there's a difference between 91 days and more than 91 days. What am I trying to tell you? If I give you 91 days, then that requirement is actually not met. Requirement 1, because it says more than 91 days. So what I'm trying to say is I should give you 92 days. That is more than 91 days. If it is just 91, then this requirement is actually not met. Why not? Because it's actually not more than 91 days. I hope your mathematics is correct there. That is how we trick you. Those are the technical things we ask you in a test. We say 91 and then you think that is the mistake a lot of you make with that quiz. Oh, let me first talk about that quiz. Let me just express my utmost disappointment with that quiz because you guys performed poor. A lot of you performed very poor in that quiz, and that is why you need to make up with that with the next quiz next week. And guys, one of the problems, I particularly made it like that. One of the problems that you guys encountered is for the one question where you had to calculate the text, I gave you someone that is 65 years. I think, no. I gave you, yes, I think 66 years or something like that. But remember the table say under 65. So which means you needed to use the under 65. But the options I gave you the options for, I think, over 65, and therefore I can't recall this question, but I just know the answer was none of the above, because the answer was not included in those options that I gave you, but it's because of these things where more than 91 days actually mean it should be 92 then. It should be more than 91 days. We already spoke about half a day is even a full day. Remember, we spoke about those things. Okay, let me go back to my requirements. He or she must have been physically present in South Africa for more than 91 days in aggregate. Now, guys, in total, I also told you it doesn't have to be consecutive, so it doesn't have to follow each other. It doesn't have to be 91 days from 1 March to, and then 91 days later. It doesn't have to be. The aggregate, the total, when you add it, it can be 10 days in March, 11 in February, in April, 20 in, you know, in the next month. And so as long as the total, the aggregate is more than 91 days during the, and this is the very important word there, during the current year of assessment. Now, guys, if we are busy with the current year of assessment, remember we are already in the 2022 year of assessment. So we need to look then for 1 March 2021 up to last day of February 2022. So that it would be the current year. And you should have been present for, if you are present in South Africa for more than 91 days, then we say requirement 1 is met. Now, guys, very important, even if the requirement is not met, you must still go to 2 and 3. You will then obviously have to conclude and say, based on the above, requirement 1 was not met, because you will see sometimes requirement 1 might not be met, but the requirement 2 is still met and 3 is still met. However, in order for you to be a resident based on the physical presence test, you must meet all the requirements. Do you see? And remember, it's not all, so which means you need to meet all these requirements. Let's go to the second requirement. The person should be, and remember, guys, this test is only applicable to natural persons. That is why we use the terms he or she. He or she must have been physically present in South Africa for more than 91 days in aggregate during each of the 5, and this very important word here, preceding years of assessment. Guys, remember I told you, if we are looking for 2022, then this will be the current year, right? Now, if we go to requirement 2, where we say 5 previous years, preceding just mean previous years, then obviously it would be 2021, 2020, yeah? 2019, 2018, yeah? 2017. Do you see 5 previous years? 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5. Guys, you cannot include 2022 in previous years because that is the current year. That is another mistake that students make. Current year, that was 2022. If I look at the previous 5 years, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, that is my 5 previous years. Now we need to look for each of those years if you were present in South Africa for more than 91 days. Then the last requirement, and he or she must have been physically present in South Africa for more than 915 days in aggregate during the 5 preceding years. So these days that you've just calculated, remember you must first see whether it is more than 91 days in each of these years. Then as a last step, we say also add those days together for those 5 years, and it should be more than 915 days in total during the 5 preceding years of assessment. And if all of these are met, then that person will be a resident for tax purposes. Now, guys, you will cease to be a resident if you comply with the physical presence test. So even if you meet all of these requirements, but you were absent from South Africa for 330 days continuously. So guys, sometimes you can be 91 days present in South Africa, but after that you might have been absent for 330 days continuously. Then we say you will not be a resident anymore for tax purposes. So we say then you will be deemed not to be a resident from the first day that you are absent, and that is only applicable to the physical presence test. Now, guys, just to apply the notes or the information that we just discussed, let's have a look at this example quickly. Mrs. Abel lives in the UK. Now, guys, can someone quickly tell me UK, what does it stand for? And then, so yes, let's first look at that. What does UK stand for?
United Kingdom.
United Kingdom.
All right, thank you. Well done to the both of you. Now, which countries make up the United Kingdom? Because some people ask you these things in interviews and things, and then you don't know. Because there's United Kingdom, then we also have Great Britain, and it's a number of countries that make up those things. So UK, which countries are those ones? Talk to me.
So I think
Yes?
it's Ireland, Wales, and Great Britain.
Who's speaking? Jeremiah? Just repeat, Jeremiah.
Is it not Ireland, Wales, and Great Britain?
Great Britain. So which country? Great Britain is a number of countries.
England.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are wrong. Anyone else that want to help? Because he didn't give all of them.
It's sir.
Yes,
sir.
please. Go ahead.
Very good.
It's England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland.
Okay, Sean is almost correct. Thank you, Sean. I hope you didn't Google. Anyone else? Why am I saying Sean is almost correct? Because, guys, for the sake of time, I'll just tell you quickly. It's not just Ireland. It's Northern Ireland. Ireland is divided. Okay, so you have Ireland and you have Northern Ireland. So it's important that you actually indicate that it is Northern Ireland. But yes, Sean was correct. It's Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and England. That is what makes up the UK. I'm sure you've learned something for today. Thank you. Just say thank you that I taught you what makes up the UK. Anyway, so Mrs. Abel lives in the UK where she is ordinary resident. So guys, when people sometimes say UK, it just means in one of those countries, but it actually falls under UK. So I'm sure some of you want to know now. So is she now living in Scotland? Is she living in England? That is irrelevant. Just know that she lived in one of those 4 places. Okay. So Mrs. Abel lives in the UK where she is ordinary resident. So, okay, they already tell you apparently she's ordinary resident, but we will then continue to say, but is she resident in South Africa for tax purposes? Okay, so let's continue. So she visits South Africa on a regular basis. Her time spent in South Africa for the current and previous year of assessment is, so they tell you that the current year is 2021, so we will just work with that. 100 days, 2020, and they gave us all that information. And the question is Mrs. Abel a resident as defined? And they say ignore the effects of double tax agreements. Guys, very important. I must always indicate this in a test, whether you should ignore double tax agreements. And if I don't indicate that, then you must consider double tax agreements. What is a double tax agreement? We spoke about this. We said the two countries might have an agreement in place where they sign a double tax agreement where it is actually decided that a person need to pay tax. Now, if there's a DTA, then obviously you don't even have to consider these tests, because that double tax agreement take precedent over all of these rules then. So guys, let's look at the solution. So the answer, requirement 1, more than, and I want you to always write more than 91 days test, okay? So let's look for the current year is met, because the current year Mrs. Abel was present for more than 91 days. She was present for 100 days. Guys, and I want you to tell me that. So say, yes, she was in the country for more than 91 days for this year, and I want you to link the facts with the theory. So tell me, she was present for 100 days. So link the two. I don't want you to just tell me, yes, it was met. Tell me, how did you determine that it was met? Okay, then the 5 preceding years. So the 5 previous years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's see if 91 days or more than 91 days. Yep, 92, 195, 194, 101, 97. So I can see requirement 2 is also met because she was present for more than 91 days in each of the 5 previous years. And then the last requirement is these days here, these 5 years, these days, does it add up to 915? So let's have a look. Apparently, if you add all of that, you get 676 days, and therefore she did not meet that last requirement, so she did not exceed 915. Guys, it's basically you adding 92, 195, 194, 101, 97. If you add all of that, they say that you get 676, and that is obviously not more than 915, and therefore we have to conclude to say she is not a resident in South Africa for tax purposes. Guys, I hope you got that. We only have 5 minutes remaining. I will now open the floor for questions. We can end there for today. We will continue again on Monday. Any questions relating to the work that we've just covered? Any questions?
Sir?
Yes, go ahead.
For requirement 2, when linking the facts with the theory, should you also say 2020 was 92 days, 2019 was 195 days, 2018 was that?
Yes, I get your question. Thank you, Loida. Yes, that's a very good question. So she's asking, like I said earlier, you know, give me more this part here, link the facts and stuff. Yes, I want you to do that. Guys, you have enough time in a test. Text is one of those courses where you have enough time. You can literally sit there because it's theory based as well as calculations, so you have always had enough time, and that is just for completeness. So to answer Loida, yes, I want you to give me basically those facts. Guys, it doesn't have to be a long story. You can even say 2020 92 days, comma, 2019 195 days, comma, and things like that. It doesn't have to be a long story, but just give it for completeness sake to say, listen here, I've actually done that. And then for number 3, again, show me by saying you know, this story here, 2020 92 days, or basically show me 92 plus 195 plus 194 plus 101 plus 97. That gave me 676. Sorry, yeah, 676, and that is not more than 915. So to answer, yes, I want you to always link the facts with the scenario. Sorry, your answer and the facts should be linked to the